Hello, Pittsburgh Penguins fans. Happy Friday, February 10th. For today's show, we have Annie on from Anaheim Ducks Twitter to fully preview this game against the Anaheim Ducks. 10 p.m. start time. Going to go into how the Ducks have played as of late, who is going to go at the deadline, who's going to stay, maybe a coaching change at the end of the year, go into the last meeting that these two teams played, and the keys for both teams to win this one at the Honda Center. And it's all coming up right after this drop.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Follow this show's Twitter at @LNorthShore And of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. You can visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. So with that being said, I am now joined by Annie, another first-time guest on the Locked On Penguins podcast. I figured we would get together because not only does she watch the Ducks a lot, she actually went to college in Pittsburgh, and so she's watched a lot of Penguins games. So she, very well versed with this team and also around the league. If you're not supporting her content, I think you're doing a lot of things wrong. But Annie, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. This game should be a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored. I love following you on Twitter and love all your in-game tweets and all your locked on episodes. I tune into them. So I'm quite a little starstruck. I got to be honest, for coming on this show. So anytime I get to check another Locked On show off the list, I'm working my way. But no, I appreciate the kind words. And yes, I did take advantage of a lot of student rush deals during my time in Pittsburgh. Loved my 4 years there. So I'm pumped for this game. This game is always circled on my calendar. Just I know we don't, twice a year we get it with the home and away switch, but always one that I look forward to. So I'm pumped for tomorrow. So
yeah, Penguins California road trip is here. 10 p.m. start time. I said on my Thursday episode, I love late night hockey on the East Coast. You're obviously on the West Coast. Some people in this city and around do not like late night hockey. You know what? I love it. So again, 10 p.m. start time.
Pop a Red Bull, get a Red Bull vodka, get a Diet Coke going, get a nice Bailey's in your coffee, and just kick back. Honestly, though, watching having to watch the Ducks while I was in school, of course I was 18 through 22 at the time, is pretty easy to do. But I mean, I get it. If you got work the next day, it's kind of a pain to have to stay up and you're falling asleep at your TV. You're it's only the end of the second. Oh my gosh, I got another period of this. But given that it's a Friday, kind of perfect. I mean, if you're going out with your friends, hit up a bar that's going to be on TV. You got something to watch late night, or just kick back on your couch. All good. All good.
Exactly.
See,
yeah.
And that's the thing. I was thinking about that too. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, people can even have a cup of coffee. So that's
exactly.
Well.
Yeah, exactly. But I was looking at the games coming up this weekend, and because it's Super Bowl weekend, there's so many just thrown in matinee starts, but they all start at 9:30 over on the West Coast. So unless you're an early bird, you got to wake up early to watch hockey in some cases. But it's the grass is always greener depending on who you are. But
it's only it's only for less than a week a year. So I feel especially the Penguins have 2 games this weekend. They go to play the Ducks, and then they go across 20 minutes to go to Los Angeles to take on the Kings at Crypto.com Arena. And that's a back-to-back.
It's not 20 minutes, but
it's not. I forget how long it is. I know it's close.
It's close. It's close. I mean, probably a half hour without traffic, which is never the case. So probably closer to an hour. But yeah, that's Dustin Brown's statue and banner unveiling night, I'm pretty sure.
Dustin Brown getting a statue, that is something else. But don't want to get too off topic, because we probably could do that for a full episode.
I was gonna say, you can save that for your Saturday content for that.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring that up with JD when I do the recap. But second meeting between these two teams, Penguins won a very close one the last time, Annie. Ducks took the lead late in the third period, less than 5 minutes to go, and it was scary hours. I'm like, I don't know if the Penguins are going to come back here, and they're looking like, I mean, they had the edge in shot attempts and scoring chances and high danger chances, but John Gibson was playing one heck of a game, probably one of his best starts of the season. But Penguins tied up with less than 20 seconds to play. Jake Gensel wins it in overtime after Trevor Zegras, for some reason, passed on a breakaway, which I still will not understand. What do you think the Ducks can take from that game coming into this one? Because, again, they played the Penguins a lot tougher than I thought they would, and they gave them fits for that game.
It's so funny because the Ducks tend to, well, with the exception of a couple of teams, we won't talk about that Bruins game a couple weeks ago. I just eliminate that from my memory. But the Ducks tend to kind of rise to the occasion a lot of times this season when they play better teams. And then when it's just god-awful teams, they play like their god-awful self. But that was one thing that I really noticed about that game was just the no quit in that team. And obviously Gibby standing on his head. And, you would think being a hometown guy, that would be a place that he would play really well. But given the past in his career, that really hasn't been the case. I think, what was it, opening night? Maybe it was a couple years ago, I want to say. But, the Ducks did not fare well at PPG. But, no, I think, that was one of those games where even down when they had the lead, I knew the Penguins had been struggling, but part of me, like, no lead is comfortable in hockey, especially with the Ducks. I was like, they're going to tie this. Like, they're not, we're not winning this game in regulation. And of course, it was Brian Rust that tied it, which, being a Notre Dame hockey fan too, that was just like the dagger in my heart. I was like, damn it. But, a lot has changed a little bit has changed for the Ducks since then. Obviously, going into tomorrow night, Troy Terry being injured in that Dallas game, and he's easily, not even close, has been the Ducks' best player this season. It's the reason why he was elected. He was the Ducks representative to the All-Star game. I know they moved Ryan Strome up on the wing with Zegras there, which is great. But it'll be definitely trying to fill those shoes will be difficult. But they've been playing some good hockey as of recently, which is alarming given the fact that so many fans have bought in on the tank, the tank for Connor Bedard, which was not on my forecast going into the season. But when you have a shot at a generational talent like Bedard, you're kind of saying, hey, if we're in the bottom of the barrel here, might as well take advantage. But they've seemed to have found their footing a bit, at least for the last 5 games they have before the All-Star break and coming out of it. So we'll see. Should be interesting.
Yeah, and I was, looking, funny enough, the Ducks have won 5 of the last 10 games. They've actually won one in a row. So they actually are playing decent hockey compared, I think, to earlier where they, I think, Andy, we discussed this on Twitter. At one time, they had one regulation win in 30-something plus games. I don't even know how that was possible, considering they had a ton of wins. Guess they just loved going to overtime and shootouts, but that was very weird as well. And also, I figured I would ask you this too. This was a team I think a lot of people expected to take that step forward this season. You signed Frank Vetrano. You signed John Klingberg, do that deal. It was, 1 year kind of prove it thing. If you're bad, you trade them at the deadline, which I think is what they're going to do. You bring in a couple other players as well. Did anyone expect them to be this bad this year, especially after last year? They were in the playoff race for the first half of last season before it all fell off. Just what happened overall that really just derailed this thing?
I think last season, you're kind of riding the high, like at first, everything's clicking. They're all communicating really well. And then injuries kind of start to pile. You kind of, things kind of start to level out during the season. But going into the off season, I think everyone's, kind of, at least my thought was, all right, you got these young guys that have shown so much promise, so much, potential here, but you're also missing a huge piece of that locker room. That's with the retirement of Ryan Getzlaf. And I think a lot of people really underestimated how much of a loss that was, not only to their play on the ice, but in the locker room. And everyone can kind of, if you want to attribute the fact to them not playing well to there not being a guy holding the letter, I personally think that's a little stretching it there. Like, that's not the reason they're not playing well, is by giving a guy a letter. But I do think it's a very transitional year for this team to really figure out an identity and, kind of say, hey, who's our core group? Let's figure out like what Ducks hockey is going to be going forward, because you just lost the guy that embodied it for the last, for his entire career, but wearing the C for the last 17 seasons. So, which saying that makes me feel not even seven. No, it wasn't 17 seasons, probably 16, I want to say, but it just makes you feel incredibly old. No, it wasn't 16 seasons. He was named the captain in 2013. No, not 2013. It was right after Scott Niedermayer retired. So it would be 13, 14 seasons. Okay. Yeah. So ballpark. It was fine.
Right around
but
there.
Injuries piling up too. And I think it's just a lot to put on these young guys to say, all right, this team is going to take a huge step forward. And you can expect the individual players to, but you also bring in, like you said, you bring in Frank Vetrano, you bring in Ryan Strome, you have a John Klingberg, you have a Dmitry Kulikov, who apparently people think would be a nice fit in Pittsburgh. I don't think so. But, a lot of guys in that room that, they're getting used to a new system. They're coming from different teams, and it takes a bit to find that fitting. And, this season, it took longer than anticipated. And with the trade deadline coming up and with the stage of what this team is, where this team is at, I think the guy that expected this team to be where they are is probably Pat Verbeek, the Ducks general manager. Maybe not as bad, but he even said himself, he said, hey, you look at the past few Stanley Cup champions, they all had high draft picks. They all had 1, 2, 3 overall picks. And the last time the Ducks had a pick that high, well, Mason McTavish at third, but then Bobby Ryan back in the Sidney Crosby lottery draft. So, at this stage in this rebuild, it's a painful process as a fan, but it's one of those things that, you got to go through. But did anyone expect them to be this bad? No, not this bad, because on paper, they really shouldn't be this bad. But just night in and night out, you just look at some of the games they've played. And for the longest time, up until probably the holidays, and even then, like the power play, just some of the line combinations, it's just like these guys look like it's training camp and they're still learning to get to know each other here. Like, meanwhile, the rest of the league is taking off, like figuring their stuff out, and the Ducks are still, seems like back in September. So I think you can attribute it to a lot of things. But yeah.
It is. Yeah, it's weird because I expected them to not make the playoffs, but I thought they would take a step forward because, I did a look ahead on my Thursday episode, and, Adam Henry, Trevor Zegras, Ryan Strome, Frank Petrano, Mason McTavish, Max Jones. That's a good top six. I don't think it's among the best in the league, but you can win a lot of games, I feel like, with that top six. Even your third line with Kumswall, who I think should be garnering some trade interest at the deadline, Lutterstrom, Jakob Silverberg, who's still kicking. That's a decent top nine. It's just crazy how, this year has gone. And, I think we're going to get more into the trade stuff coming up just right after this commercial break as we segue into this. But, before we do that, this year, the only app you need at your Super Bowl party is FanDuel, which is America's #1 sportsbook. Really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they are the #1 sportsbook in America. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. You can download that app right now so you can bet Super Bowl 57 with a no-sweat first bet. You'll get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet does not win. They also let you bet on everything from the money line to point spreads to who will even score a touchdown. One more time for you all. Bets I like here. Give me the Eagles money line. I think they're going to win the Super Bowl. They've been the best team in the league all year. I don't trust Patrick Mahomes fully against that Eagles defense. And if there's a prop bet maybe for Jalen Hurts to throw for over 200 plus yards, I also like that one as well. It's all in an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. And best of all, you can get paid your winnings instantly. So join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/lockedon to claim your no-sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, we're back here in this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm Hunter Hodes. That is Annie from Ducks Twitter and just a content creator overall for the NHL. So trade deadlines in 3 weeks. Annie, saw a couple of deals already. Bo Horvat to the Islanders, Vladimir Tarasenko to the New York Rangers. Metro teams trying to get better while Ron Hextall is probably just still sleeping away in his cave with all the polar bears up north. They're just not having a good time. He's just not having a good time right now. He's taking a nap. But the Ducks, I think they're going to be pretty busy at this deadline, and they have a player, Annie, we've discussed this on Twitter. Adam Henrique is someone who I think would make a lot of sense for the Penguins. 33 years old, third line center. Jeff Carter's not doing it anymore. Has almost 20 goals this season. Decent underlying numbers. Explain to the audience here why you think he would be a good fit, and just, why you think he'd be a good fit for any team acquiring him this offseason.
I mean, I just look at his performance this entire season. It really feels like, and he's a guy that's really gotten a lot of heat the last few seasons for really not living up to his, $5.5 million contract hit, which I would say, up until at this point, especially as of recently, he is very well living up to that hype. But I mean, the man's found his scoring touch again. Once he gets going, and we saw it in his early days in New Jersey. The guy's an elite hockey player, and obviously not, we're not talking like top 10 or anything like that, but he's a guy that can be on your line, can generate scoring chances, can get the puck in the net. I mean, for a team that needs offense, for a team that needs depth in that bottom six, I think he's a perfect fit. And those are the guys that you need going into a playoff run. Those are the guys that you need to win Stanley Cups too. And when you have, obviously, when you're trying to fit like a bottom six kind of character, you're not looking at a guy like Adam Henrique, but having an Adam Henrique in your bottom six certainly isn't going to hurt. So it'll be interesting to see like what kind of return and what kind of price tag that Pat Verbeek is going to put on him. I think the Vladimir Tarasenko deal is interesting to look at, and kind of where you're evaluating kind of what kind of value you put on like a first round pick going into this season, most likely lottery protected in case, worst comes to worst for a lot of teams. But oh my gosh, if you're in need of offense of any kind, I'd be giving the Ducks a call, because there's guys ready to, even Max Comtois, I think would be a great, bottom six guy for a lot of teams. We also got some plentiful of defensemen that could be on the move. So the Ducks will, in fact, be very busy, because honestly, Pat Verbeek hasn't done all that much this season in terms of acquisitions, which kind of tells you that he's kind of buying in on the direction of the team, just kind of sinking to the bottom. I think the only thing, the last transaction I remember is picking up Jason Megna off waivers. Pittsburgh Penguins former prospect Jason Megna. Yep. I remember watching him it's funny. I remember being in college and watching him like the Penguins training camp that they have, and they bring all the young guys out too. And like, it was him, Scott Harrington, who's now with the San Jose Sharks, and Bo Bennett, who is no longer in the NHL. And if you could tell me out of those three that Bo Bennett would be the one that's not playing in the NHL or had the shortest NHL career, like, everyone would have told you were nuts, it's just crazy. You just never know like how somebody's career could go. And part of that, obviously, the guy, he's like that guy in SpongeBob, like the glass bones and paper skin, like just the man breathes and he like breaks a rib or something. So I don't know. It's funny how times change, man. But I know that
the Bo Bennett situation. Yeah, the guy got hurt celebrating, for God's sake. It's just, I feel so bad for him and all that. But yeah, that was going to lead into my next question. And it seems like the Ducks are going to be pretty active, and I think they're going to get a lot of calls for a good chunk of players. Would assume John Klingberg is on that list too. You said Comtois, Adam Henrique, Kevin Shattenkirk, maybe, if I had to guess. Who do you think is going to definitely be gone by this year's deadline? And speaking of that, again, the Penguins and Ducks have a history of trading with each other. The most recent one with Rickard Rakell, who will make his return to the Honda Center. I think that's probably going to be a pretty emotional thing. We'll get to that in just a second. But if you had to guess right now, who do you think is off this team in a few weeks?
I do think Klingberg's gone. That's a guarantee. I don't think it'll be the return that Ducks fans want or anticipate. I don't think he's played to the level of a first round pick this season. He has definitely found his groove more in the last few weeks. I think part of that is like, hey, you want to get out of here, man, right? You got to play a little better. So, but, and also, he plays all his time in Dallas, and he's coming in, trying to figure out a new system. Everyone was kind of hyping up that he was going to be on a pair with Jamie Drysdale. And of course he goes down, late October for the season, but definitely think he's gone. I could see Kevin Shattenkirk going. I mean, for anyone that needs, a second, third pairing defenseman, going into the playoffs. I mean, the guy's got cup experience. The guy's got playoff experience. I don't see if you're in need of a defenseman, I don't see why you wouldn't be knocking on Kevin Shattenkirk's door. I also think Anthony Stolarz, our backup goalie, might be on the move for a team that just needs some backup assistance. He won't be. I wouldn't be starting him for the Stanley Cup playoffs. But listen, if you need a goalie, we've got Lukas Dostal down in San Diego. He is NHL ready, and he's going to come up. He'll back up Gibby next year. And, at this point, Stolarz is a free agent come next year. Might as well get something for him. Mm-hmm. So I could definitely see him being on the move. Adam Henrique, it would depend. I think it would depend on how much salary Verbeek is willing to retain on that deal. Because for a lot of cup contending teams, of course, with the hard cap, you're limited in so many options for players that you can acquire there. So, I mean, I don't know if he's willing to go 50, but at that rate, the Ducks have a lot of cap space too. And with Klingberg off the books, which they'll retain Klingberg for sure. They'll retain at least 50% because he's a rental. It'll go off the books come the off season. So, hey, no, that's what the GM's jobs are for, though. You kind of negotiate there and figure out, how much salary retained and all that. Like I know for, I can't remember if they did it for Raquel, but I know for Lindholm, when they sent Hampus to Boston, they retained 50% of his salary too. Kulikov, I know, has generated a little bit of talks around the league. And of course, Max Comtois, which is so funny because I remember Max Comtois, it was after the COVID season. And, he was the Ducks leading scorer, Ducks, leading, which doesn't say much. They were terrible that year and literally dead last in every offensive category. But people were saying when the Ducks were in the conversation for Jack Eichel, they were like, oh, Max Comtois is off the table. Like, don't touch him. I'm like, really? That's who you're protecting. Like you're not worried about Zegras and Drysdale. Like you're more worried about Max Comtois, really? But no, I definitely think he could generate some interest. But he'll be busy, and I'll be shocked. I mean, not to say obviously there's people that are not going to get traded on the team, but I wouldn't be surprised if there were maybe a few surprise players that are gone. But I imagine Verbeek's trying, as your new GM, as you're rebuilding, you want to stock up on draft picks. You want to, get as much capital back as you can when you're trying to rebuild a hockey club. So I imagine he will be booked and busy and down. Even last year, he was like a week out. I think the Lindholm trade was a few days before the deadline. And then of course the Raquel trade came right at the deadline. So he'll be busy from now until what is it? 3:00? 3:00. Oh, 3:00 here.
I think it's 3 or 4 o'clock. And speaking of that, Rickard Raquel makes his return to Anaheim for this game, his first time back since the trade, really. And I feel like it's going to be probably a pretty emotional scene for him. He was there his whole career, a lot of
Definitely.
great moments. I would have to think he's going to get a tribute video if the Ducks do that for some of their players.
They definitely do.
Just when you think of Rickard Raquel, Penguins fans obviously love the fit that he's brought, to this team, whether it's with Malkin, whether it's with Crosby. He's been one of the most consistent wingers this season. When you think of Rickard, just what comes to mind for you, just because he was a member for the Ducks for so long?
The number 67, I can't think of. The fact that, the Ducks have this weird rule. I don't know if the Penguins do too, but like where they give the young guys high numbers and you have to like earn your way down to like a lower number. And the fact that Raquel felt so attached to 67 that he kept it throughout his career. But like, it's just, I don't know, something about that just always struck me. But I always appreciate it, even though he was, affected by injuries for a bit. But like, even after he had that peak, I think it was 2014. It was maybe 20. I got to look it up. It's going to bother me. But that really peak high season he had, and, you could tell it definitely bothered him and the team that like he really never got back to 2018. That's what I was. Why did I say 2014? He was rookie that year. But, where he had over 30 goals that year and really kind of was, hey, was this the peak Rickard Raquel? But he came to this, he kept coming in every day and kept putting up just insane highlight goals and you could tell he just loved the community. He was very involved with the team, very involved with the fans, loved the fan base. So it's just, it was a guy, you always feel that way about guys that you've drafted and you've seen grow up in the organization. Yeah. So it'll definitely be an emotional moment for a lot of us in that building, and seeing the applause and seeing him return back to Anaheim. So, but I'm so thrilled for him getting the opportunity to play with guys like Crosby and Malkin, night in and night out, and have a chance. I love when these talented guys leave the Ducks and the state this organization is in now, and they just shine, and they're put with talented players where they can showcase their potential. So, or not their potential, their talent as well. So as much as it hurts not seeing them in Ducks uniforms anymore, it's even better that they're flying off elsewhere, pun intended.
Yeah, well, Penguins obviously can't fly, but he has been great overall since the acquisition. I wasn't big on the contract that he signed at the time. Just thought the years in the years in the AAV was a little high, but he's proven me wrong in a big way. He has been awesome for them this season. He is the better fit with Crosby and Gensel. Just a great playmaker, wonderful shot. He deserves to be on that top power play unit, and it's been a match made in heaven ever since they acquired him. But that wraps up the second segment. Coming up to end the show, we are going to get into our keys for each team to win the game, and then I think we'll get a prediction. That's all coming up right after this commercial break. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm Hunter Hodes. That is Annie over there from Ducks Twitter. So, and Annie, big game for the Penguins here, especially. I know for the Ducks, most of their fans probably want them to keep losing for Connor Bedard, but for the Penguins, it's a team that's been really struggling as of late. They got a big win, though, against the Colorado Avalanche on Tuesday. Come from behind win. They did not deserve those 2 points. They probably should have lost in regulation. Casey DeSmith was awesome. I expect him to start in this one. Tristan Jarry getting close, probably not there yet. Earliest I think he'll play is Saturday, if not then. Definitely next Tuesday when they go to San Jose before they come back to Long Island to play the Islanders. But when you look at this one, what would you say the main keys are for the Ducks to come out with the win? Because they almost did it last time when John Gibson was playing out of his mind.
Well, that's going to be a key for this game. Is Gibby's got to stand on his head. And the defense has obviously got to somehow figure out a way to shut down those two top lines for the Penguins. Obviously, that's one thing, as bad as the Ducks offense has been, the Ducks defense has somehow been even more atrocious this entire season. Whereas, even in the last 5 games where they've gone 4-0-1, just guys left unopened, just not really communicating well. The Ducks defense just really not knowing what they're doing, all crowding in one spot. Like it seems very discombobulated there. But honestly, and the Ducks obviously coming off a pretty similar game. Obviously, they didn't beat the defending Stanley Cup champions. They did 2 weeks ago, but they taken the Chicago Blackhawks down in overtime in a game that they probably should not have won to begin with, and was pretty boring to watch mostly overall. But their 2 games up until the Frankfurt-Toronto overtime winner came from the fourth line. So we're seeing some scoring opportunities coming from all 4 lines, and hopefully get to see a little bit of more of that. And depending on the health of Troy Terry, if he's going to be in, he didn't practice today. So I'm going to lean towards the fact that he's not going to be in the lineup, and definitely try, guys need to step up and create those opportunities and create those scoring chances that he's done such a good job of doing so far this season. So those would probably be my big 3 takeaways. And the penalty kills still keep doing their thing. They were able to shut down, despite losing against the Stars, able to shut down the top 10 power play in the league. We're able to shut down, I think, 5 power play opportunities. And hopefully I love Mason McTavish, but the one thing I will say about him is he takes a lot of dumb penalties. So kind of embody a little bit more of that Troy Terry. Troy Terry's very good at drawing penalties, so maybe take a couple notes from him and not do stupid things to get you in the box, and let the Penguins power play go to work. So,
well, that unit has struggled. I shouldn't say a little bit. It struggled a good chunk this season. It's just been very inconsistent.
Anything with Sidney Crosby makes me nervous. All right,
that's very fair. The talent that they can put out on that power play is very daunting. It's just, it seems like the penalty kills these days are so geared up for the Penguins penalty kill, and they watch the tape on it and they know exactly what to do right away to make it uncomfortable. And the Penguins just are not able to adapt to it. It's like they're just allergic to it. And I do think that's a little bit of a key. Yeah, it's really weird. I do not get it. And I do think it's a little bit of a key in this one. The power play has to be a bit better. I didn't really like it against the Avalanche, but they also didn't really have that many opportunities. But also, I'll say this. People just have to do what they did for the most part last time against the Ducks, especially in the third period. They out-attempted them 21-5, 77% of the scoring chances, 9-1 high danger chance in that third period. Overall for the game at 5v5, the Penguins had 64% of the shot attempts, 64% of the scoring chances, and 69% of the high danger chances. And they also had 67% of the expected goals. The fact that it was that close just goes to show how awesome John Gibson was. And I know he hasn't had a good year, but he put on a show in that one and looked like the Gibson of old when I think he was a top 5 goaltender in the league. So the Penguins have to keep peppering Gibson, I think, with a lot of shots. Power play, just the special teams in general have to be better. The penalty kill has been a little up and down, and would have loved to see some depth scoring in this one. It has been it's an age since we have gotten consistent depth scoring on this team. Jeff Carter has not scored in his last 12 to 14 games. Ditto with Brock McGinn. Teddy Bluger has 1 goal in the last calendar year. Yes, you heard me right there, Annie. 1 goal in his last calendar year. It is a horrendous third line. Kasperi Kapanen, he does something once in a blue moon. Your bottom 6 offense right now basically comes from Ryan Poehling and Josh Archibald. It's not good enough, and that needs to change. The reason why they win these games is because they usually get good, decent goaltending, and their top 6 carries them to wins. So top 6 is going to have to be good in this one as well. And I also want to see them try and shut down that Ducks top 6. I know they're not a good team, but when you can throw out a top line that has Adam Henrique, Trevor Zegras, and Ryan Strome, I think you're doing some things right. Max Jones, Mason McTavish, Frank Petrano, Penguin killer Frank Petrano, I should say. I know it didn't work last time. I will say it again. If you bet on hockey, you can go to FanDuel, circle Frank Petrano as an anytime goal scorer. He scores almost every time against the Penguins. Go back to his Bruins days. Go back to his Panthers days. Go back to his Rangers days in the playoffs. Seemed like every game he was getting a goal in this one. So that's what I'm really looking for. Also, please start the game on time. They have been horrendous at starts. It's really weird to see too. They'll play like utter garbage for the first period, bleeds into the second period, and then they'll wake up a little bit in the third period. That's exactly what happened against the Avalanche on Tuesday, Andy. They played like absolute crap for 40 minutes. They were lucky to only be down 1, and then they turn on in the third period, and it looks like a completely different team. And it's like, why aren't we getting this for a full 60 minutes here? It's just something is maybe getting lost in the message from Mike Sullivan, who was one of the best coaches in the league. And, of course, better defensive awareness. This team has been a poor defensive team throughout the last couple of months now, and they've been fairly healthy for the most part since Jeff Petrie and Chris Letang got back. The only one they're missing right now is Jan Ruda, and he's probably less than a week away from returning as well. So that's what I'm really looking for in this one. You know, because they got that win against the Avalanche, you got to get at least 4 out of 6 points on this California part of the road trip. You play 2 of the worst teams in hockey. I know they've played you tough the last couple of weeks. You have to bank those points. The game against the Kings, that's going to be the tough one to me because you're playing on a back-to-back. They're one of the best teams in the Pacific, but you got to beat the Ducks and you got to beat the Sharks. There's just no excuse because then you go to Long Island to play the Islanders, another tough game. 4 out of 6 points is what I'm looking for with this trip. Do you have anything to add for your keys, or do you want to just make a prediction on what you think is going to happen?
I was going to say that's pretty. I mean, I won't say. I don't think they'll come out of the road trip. Maybe, I could see. I was gonna say, thinking about kind of the road trip coming up ahead for the Penguins. I know that's one. I don't know. It's funny, everyone used to go into like California road trips, and back when all the Sharks, the Kings, and the Ducks were all like playoff contenders, top of the West. Like, you were lucky to get out of there with 2 or 3 points, and now people are like, "Hey, we want 4 at least 4,
exactly
4 to 6 of them." Plus, I mean, the LA night, you've got like Dustin Brown's retirement night. You've got the statue unveiling. There'll be emotions there, with the former captain in the building too. But I don't know. Yeah, if you're a team coming in, you're a team that's fighting for a playoff spot. You can't be losing to the Sharks. You can't be losing to the Ducks, despite how the Sharks got absolutely spanked tonight. But I mean, they took down Tampa Bay. I can't remember what exactly. I know they beat the Lightning. I think they came back.
Yeah, you're right. The Sharks actually did just beat the Lightning down in Tampa. So they actually are playing some better hockey as of late. I mean, heck, they just beat the Penguins 6-4 in Pittsburgh. Granted, Casey DeSmith did not look that good in that game when Logan Couture went off, but still, they took it to the Penguins in that game. And I don't think it's going to be a layup, but still, those are two games that you're playing against bad teams that are tanking. You're in the playoff race. You got to win them.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if the Ducks, honestly, their chances at Bedard go out the window just given overtime losses. Like the amount of times that they have just gone to overtime. You're like, okay, thanks for the point. Like when you're a tanking hockey club, like the wins, like the big wins, like those feel good. But like, like whomping on the Coyotes. I'm like, really? Really? Like this doesn't feel good. Like I don't like this.
Yeah, that and the Blackhawks, I feel like just
exactly. That's why, like, personally, just from me remembering 2015, like beating the Blackhawks is always just a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling, especially given that they're just a trash organization too. But I'm not wrong. But as well, even like now, given this newfound rivalry between the Coyotes, like those wins are nice, but there's also you're looking at the standings, you're like, okay, this really doesn't. It's not helping the case for Bedard, but with this draft, you're if we land anywhere in the top 3 or 4, I'll be pleased. Would like Bedard, would like Mason McTavish to have his buddy back with him in Anaheim. But I don't know. There was like this poll out of people where fans would want Connor Bedard to land. And majority obviously said they didn't want him in Chicago, but a good amount of people were good with him being in Anaheim. But I don't know. So many people have the take where it's like, oh, I want him on an original 6 team. And I roll my eyes to the back of my head so hard. Like, imagine, like, I just think a guy like him would do so well. Like, not do so well. Well, do so well, but like would do so much for the game and the growth of it if he ended up in Anaheim, if he ended up in Columbus, if he ended up in, oh my God, if he ends up in Arizona, the NHL, my God, fans will implode. Twitter will implode if the Coyotes end up with the first overall pick.
Oh man, yeah, just especially after they play in that college arena, it's just
Mullet Arena, baby.
Hey, it does look like a pretty cool arena. I do want to potentially check out a game there. But last thing before I let you go, Annie, who wins this game and give me a final score?
It's tough to say. I don't think it'll be a blowout. I do think it'll be a close game. I'm gonna go. Give me 3-2 Ducks.
Okay.
In regulation.
Interesting. In a regulation win.
Regulation.
About that offer the Ducks, but
I don't want to do overtime. I can't do overtime again. Like I'm over.
I'm gonna go in the opposite direction. I do think it's gonna be close though. I'm actually gonna go the same as last. I won't go the same as last time. I think it's gonna be 3-2 going down to the final minute. And Mr. Empty Net Jake Ensel is going to get that one to make it 4-2, but it's going to be a close one. I do think the Penguins win it. It's going to be maybe a little bit ugly. Casey Smith gets to start. You have to hope that he stays as consistent as he did from that Colorado game. He probably won't because he stood on his head and he's just been very up and down all year. But I do think the Penguins will win this one and they'll go into Crypto.com Arena feeling good about themselves as Dustin Brown will be honored for that game and they'll be playing a really good
feel
Kings
good
team.
About themselves whooping down on the Ducks. Yeah.
Yes. Hey, they'll take the points any way they can.
Take the 2 points. Take the 2 points, especially with how close the East is. I get it. Yeah,
it is. It is not like last year. That's for sure. But that's how I see it. A 4-2 win for the Penguins. And I think, Annie, I think I don't really have anything else for you. This was a ton of fun to do. I'm glad we were able to do it for the final matchup of the season before they'll play again next season. But for those that do not follow you on social media, where can everyone see you and your wonderful content?
I am on all social media platforms at Sweet Annie OD. Talk a lot of hockey, mostly Ducks hockey, but league-wide too. Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. TikTok's probably where I spend a lot of my time. Twitter too. But yeah, that's where you can find me. Love interacting with anybody. Obviously, I have a special spot in my heart for the Yinzers and Pittsburgh and Penguins fans in general. So And love interacting, love chatting with you guys. So
Yeah, please go follow her. She does great stuff. And yes, she tries to watch as many Penguins games as she can, just because
I do try. I do my best. Whenever it's definitely one where I circle it. I'm like, all right, like if it's before a Ducks game, I'll click that one, especially if they're playing a good team. I'm like, all right.
Yeah, it's the way to do it. That's for sure. And this should be a fun game. 10 o'clock start time. Get your coffee ready if you're a little older. Get your alcohol beverages if you're a little younger. Should be a fun one. Game will end at 12:30. You're not doing anything on Saturday morning. You can stay up a little bit. Same thing for Saturday against the Kings. I'll have a special Saturday episode with Jason JD Hernandez of Locked On Ducks to recap that game. And then I'll look ahead also to the game against the Los Angeles Kings for that special episode. And then we'll recap that game on Mondays. The Penguins will head up to San Jose/Santa Clara to take on the Sharks, which is right near where the 49ers play. So that is it for this one. Hope you enjoy listening and watching it, and I'll talk with you all for a special Saturday episode with Jason JD Hernandez.